All right, that was some good time killing, Katie. Appreciate that. And my short, funny story before I get going here is I just drove from Seattle to Portland in the rain. It was like driving in a car wash. So happy to have the feet on the ground here. Happy to have you all here. I'm the district treasurer and have also been a chapter treasurer. So I've been in your shoes. Those of you that are treasurers on this call, I know what you're going through. I know some of the challenges that you have, but I'd really rather make this meeting interactive. I know you hear that every time you go on a Zoom session. Let's make it interactive, but I really want to do that. If all you do is hear me talk for the next hour, yeah, you'll get something out of it, but I think it would be much more interesting if we could deal with some current issues in the chapters. I want to understand how your chapter is doing. I can tell you about some of the resources we have for this upcoming year to help chapters, so that might be interesting to you. But before we get started, I'd like to find out what you want out of this meeting. So if you're a treasurer, can you raise your hand? How many treasurers do we have on the call here? I see 3, and I see some people are on, don't have their cameras on. And are any of you new treasurers, brand spanking new treasurers? Is everybody a returning treasurer? If anyone's brand new, say something or raise your hand. I'm just curious to know if we have any total.
I'm new.
Okay, Daniel, thank you for raising your hand. Yeah, the treasurer job next to the president is a really important job. But let me turn it back again to you guys, and I'll start with you, Daniel. What do you hope to get out of the session today?
It's so broad. I just want to know like what I need to know and do. I don't know if I'm even at a level to know what specifically I want, just like whatever I can get. That makes
I know Bill's presentation was very inspiring, and it was about leadership. I'll do a little bit of that, but it's going to be more of the nuts and bolts and practical. So Daniel, if that works for you, there will be a fair bit of that. Others that are in the meeting, other things you want to get out of it. I'm monitoring the chat here. Okay, Boise has a new treasurer, and some nice person's taking notes for that new treasurer in Boise. Anybody else? Other things you want to get out of the meeting other than the nuts and bolts? I'll tell a few stories. We'll try to have some fun here. And it looks like I've got a lot of non-treasurers in the room too. I've got some presidents and maybe even some marketing people. So you can be listening for your treasurers. Okay, so I'm going to keep it, like I said, keep it practical. If you're a brand new treasurer, you have lots of resources. The number one resource for you is the outgoing treasurer. And in fact, when we have a good treasurer transition, the incoming treasurer will perform the financial review for the past year. So if you didn't know this, every year, someone other than the treasurer is supposed to review the books, the accounting records. So that's a perfect opportunity for the new treasurer to come in, have the old outgoing treasurer look over their shoulder and go through the financial review the financial statements, review the report that's submitted every year to BHS. You all know that too, right? There's an annual report that goes to BHS. And there's also and this may be the single most important thing the treasurer does. There's a tax return that has to be filed with the IRS. It's a 990. And if you're like me in my former chapter, you may be small enough that you don't actually have to file the full return, but you have to file a form that says you're too small to have to file a full return. So let's take another poll here. How many of you filed a full 990? I'll bet there are a few chapters that are big enough to do that. Bellevue is probably big enough to file a full 990, but many of you, Boise might be as well. but some of you are just filing that form. And one of the resources I wanted to point you to, if you don't have it, the one that Katie sent out for this meeting was fantastic. The BHS Treasurer training. Did everyone take a look at that before this meeting? I see one thumb. You can fess up if you didn't. How many of you looked at that? Did a fair number of you look at it? It's great. It's actually quite good. It took me about, I redid it. It took me about a half an hour to get through it. There's another resource that BHS puts out. It's called the Treasurer's Manual. Have you all seen that? Chapter Treasurer Manual. You all have this? There's so much packed into. If you had a question, this would be the first place I would go. It talks about the tax return. It talks about fundraising. It talks about budgeting. This is if I didn't do this meeting today, I would say go read this. So this is a great resource to fall back on. So since I said the tax was the most important thing you do, I should probably back that up. And I don't want to talk the whole time. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions at this point? Anybody want to throw out a question? I'm going to leave time at the end for questions as well. No questions? Charge on.
Larry, can I ask those that are on here to put their name and their chapter identifier on their under their picture?
You know, Bob, if I knew how to do that, I'd be happy to.
Go in the upper right-hand corner,
Okay,
click on it.
upper
And there should
right-hand
be a-
corner of
There
what?
should
My
be a place
picture?
where it says change your name.
Yeah, the upper right-hand corner of your little picture, there should be 3 dots.
I
If you
got
click on that, you should say rename, and then you can rename it.
well, I'm
Easy.
clicking on it, but it's not letting me in.
Hmm. I think I can rename you, being the host.
Wait, I finally got it to open up. Okay,
Put Jim Salem.
Needs to be a right click.
There you go, Jim. Boom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if anybody else has issues with that or questions, it
Lenny,
just helps
Steve,
us
Mark.
identify where you're all from. Thank you.
All right. So I owe you
Perfect.
some explanations on why tax is so important. We're a nonprofit organization. We're actually a 501c3, and we have a mission. We have a mission to spread harmony, to educate. We have a nonprofit mission, and almost all of our efforts go towards that. So what that means is the funds that we bring in and the programs that we spend them on generally have to be consistent with that mission. Where we can get into trouble is if we were to take in dues and have a big party. That's not part of our mission, so we can't do that. But what we can do is we can have funds that are unrestricted. These would be if we have we do this in one of the chapters. We have a raffle every week, and those funds are not restricted. We can spend that on a party. We can spend that on an angel fund. So if we have someone who needs help getting contests. So what I would tell you is you have to spend it on our mission. There are ways to spend money, but it has to come from, it can't come from dues. It can't come from contributions. It has to be, like I said, the lottery, or if you do a fundraiser, you do a bake sale, you do a car wash, those funds, you have latitude to spend those. So we want to maintain our nonprofit status, 501c3 status, and that's the quickest way to lose it. I don't think it's ever happened in Evergreen. I know it's happened in the society. You have to get reinstated. It's really, we don't want to go there. We don't want to be there. So file your 990 on time. And I'm going to refer back to this manual. There's actually a calendar month by month. It's wonderful in this treasurer's manual. So this will tell you we just started in November. It will tell you what you should be doing in November. In fact, this would be fun. I could pull it out here. It probably says you should be working on your budget. Arrange for new chapter officers to attend training. So in December, work on renewals. So this is a great guide. It tells you when to start preparing the annual tax return. So here's your calendar right here. Look no further.
Larry?
Yes, question.
Yeah, question. Back in March, we had a show, and we did a bingo game thing where we collected money and we gave half of it back to the winner. Is that restricted or unrestricted money for us, the half that we kept?
That's unrestricted.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure.
Any other questions? Any other tax questions? Love tax questions. All right. Well, one other way that the treasurer can move the needle, actually move the needle in the chapter, is fundraising. So you might think, well, what does a treasurer have to do with fundraising? Well, in the West Encore chapter, of which I'm a member, we go after, there's a lot of free money out there. You may or may not know this, but a lot of cities, counties, other government organizations have money, foundations, and they are just waiting for nonprofit organizations, musical organizations, educational organizations to apply for those grants. How many of you have applied for grants? I see Rod, I see Katie, I see Jim. And tell us, give us an example of an organization that you reached out to for grant funding. This would be really interesting.
Well, I'm just raising my hand on behalf of Karen, our treasurer is down, Karen Fuel. But somebody else was going for it.
We have grants that we get on an annual basis from the For Culture group in Seattle. We also get from the Seattle, there's a Seattle Treasury. We have one person in our chorus that writes grants all year long, and so we have constant income from grants every year. Not a whole lot, probably averaging $5,000 or $6,000 a year, but it's perpetual. He just keeps right on top of them all the time.
That's fantastic. Now, that is something I would call is a best practice, to actually have part of your revenues come from grant writing. I think many chapters are probably relying on dues and their shows for revenues. But boy, if you had a grant, West Chorus, they get upwards of $10,000 a year in grants, and that'll fund the director. It'll fund a lot of things. Right. So if it's not writing grants, Rod would be a good person to talk to. Mark Morris would be a good person to talk to with West Sound Chorus. And I actually wanted to float an idea, and Bill just mentioned Bellevue does as well. I wanted to float an idea to this group. We're having a session today. We're getting together. We're going to get some nuggets. But then we're going to go away back to our normal chapter treasury jobs. I think we should meet periodically in this kind of a forum. The presidents do it. The presidents actually meet every month on a Zoom call. Bob Cox has mentioned he is contemplating having some of the other functional leads have periodic meetings, the marketing folks being one. I'd like to suggest that the treasurers have maybe not monthly, but maybe it's a quarterly meeting where this kind of format where we just talk about what's going on in our chapters, share some best practices, maybe actually process issues and challenges right on the call. You've got the brain trust, or would have the brain trust of all the treasurers on that call. Is there interest in doing that from the people on this call? Would you be, this might be a question I asked at the end of the meeting, but I'm asking in the middle of the meeting. Would this be something that would be of interest? I see a couple of thumbs going up. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to mention, you asked what grants. We were successful, and I think most of the bigger cities probably might have something similar. But in Salem, we have a transit organization that does grants every year. they're restrictive. I mean, you have to spend the money and then turn in the receipts before you get reimbursed. And they have to have something to do with the transit system, bringing in people, filling up hotels and so forth.
Mhm.
But we did get a grant that we're hoping to spend this year, but it's been granted, and it was something like $8,200 or $8,400. So, people in the larger cities, I'm sure you have transit organizations as well, and you might take a look at that, because we just found out about it, I think, 2 years ago. I mean, it was one of those things that crops up. So something to think about.
That's a great example. I'll give you another one. When we just held the Evergreen District Convention in Federal Way, the city of Federal Way has a tourism bureau, and they have a grant process. And we applied for that. We got 3,000 last year. We're getting 5,000 this year. We have to show that people came from outside of the zip code that Federal Way is in. And like you said, Jim, it's people in hotel rooms. We have to demonstrate we stimulated the local economy. So, yep, your city has them. Kitsap County, where West Sound Chorus sits, they have a give program where it's 1 day to give. Bainbridge Island runs it, and that's how we get money from donors. And oftentimes there are matching funds as well. So yeah, if you haven't checked out the whole grant process, you should be looking at that.
Larry, I would also suggest being an active member of your local Chamber of Commerce. They have a lot of grants that go through them. They may be small in size, but they're dollars that can be used for whatever you might want to do to help bring tourism into the town, or help build the revenue of the city that you live in also.
So maybe this is a good time to bring up a chapter development point, Bob. And this is in the coming year, we have budgeted an amount to support chapter development. And that can mean different things. There's a financial component to it, which I'll talk about. And that is, if for chapters that are struggling, we want to provide support. We want to help them get new members, obviously, retain their current members, but there may also be a financial component to that, financial support being available.
That's correct. So, thanks, Larry, for bringing that up. Appreciate it. There'll be an application form that'll be available online, and I'll be mailing it out to all the chapter presidents and to the treasurers, letting you know that there are funds available to help with coaching, director development, leadership development, membership creating, or membership outreach type of programs. And all you have to do is apply for it, give us an idea of how it's going to be used, why it's going to be used, and a program on accountability for it. So again, thanks, Larry, for bringing that up. Appreciate it. So just keep your eyes and ears open for that. It'll be coming out probably within the next month, next couple, well, maybe even less than that.
Yes, and what would be preferred and not kind of nice is you ask for the help before you really, really need it, right? You're not you're not down to 2 members. We want to help chapters that need that shot in the arm. So be on the lookout for that.
I would also encourage you to, if you're interested in some type of loan or grant or other programs also, is that the district has the Bud Lebo Memorial Fund, and funds are available through that also. So take advantage of these things that are within our local area to help subsidize some of your programs or a special event that you've got on the calendar.
Yep, and examples of some of those: Bellevue hosts a youth choral festival every year. I think Boise does something similar. So that Bud Lebo Fund will underwrite programs like that. So if you have, and those can be ways to generate new members. When you create a community event like that, that's a great way to get barbershop out in the community and actually attract new members. So I've got another revenue idea for you guys. and this is from the files of the obvious, maybe, but maybe not so obvious. And I'll start with a question. You all have a checking account if you're the treasurer, right? You have money parked in the bank somewhere. What kind of account do you have it parked in? Is it just a regular checking account? I'm guessing. It's probably a non-interest bearing checking account.
We have both a checking and a savings account, and we earn upwards of 50 cents a year interest on that. So.
Well, you might earn, I don't know how much money you have in there, Jim, but that's where I was going with this is at the district level, we have excess cash, right? So month in, month out, we need to keep money in the checking account. But that excess funds, we parked it in a money market account. Didn't used to earn much, but now you can earn 4 or 5% on funds that you're not using. So if you don't have a savings account, set one up. The savings it's better than zero. You could go even better and set up a money market account and earn 4 or 5%. So if you have, I mean, you can do the math. That can be a real help to the chapter to park that money in an interest-bearing account. And it's pretty easy. If you have a good bank, they've already come to you and asked you about it. But if they haven't, go to them and say, look back 12 months and say, we probably have 5 or 10,000 or 20,000, whatever the number is that we could park in this interest-bearing account and earn some money. We should all be doing that.
I've gone beyond that, Larry, and I have an interest-bearing checking account. I have a savings account, and then what I consider excess funds I won't need for the year are put in 6-month CDs, and that's paying well more than my checking or savings account.
That's great. Well, I had another. I don't know if it's as exciting as taxes, but it's a topic that we should mention here. Insurance. How exciting could that be to talk about? All the chapters have insurance, both for, and this is through the through BHS. There is insurance, but some of that insurance you have to pick up yourself. So if you have property, you have risers. That's not covered by the district, and in fact, you need insurance for your officers, for your chapter officers. What we're doing at the district level, and Bill Hickman may still be on the call, we're looking to BHS to provide think of it as a volume discount. There may be a way to offer this to the chapters, so rather than go to an insurance agent yourself, you may be able to do it for less through BHS. That's something that we're working on for 2024.
I can update you on that, Larry. I've talked to the CFO of the society, and they are definitely doing a D&O insurance for the districts and are in the process of developing a chapter option. I don't know what the costs will be, but they'll be coming out with something in the next couple of months.
Okay, that's great to know. And the other thing I would mention, this, I didn't know this, and so I'm assuming many of you don't know this, but you could be ahead of me on this. If you have a guest at your rehearsal, they're covered. Kind of think of a slip and fall event at a rehearsal. They're covered for 3 practices. After 3, they're not covered. So we need to get people to join us and not be permanent guests. There's a potential insurance problem if there is a slip and fall in the 4th or 5th session. So that's something to keep in mind as well. They're covered, but only for 3 sessions.
Let me update everybody on that one as well. I wrote an article that was in the Timber. You may have missed it. It was that there is a workaround to this one. And if you have some perma guests, people who like to sing on your risers, but don't make any effort to become a member, and you're okay with that, send their personal details to cfo@bhs.org. and they will be taken care of. Laura, go ahead. You're muted.
Can I ask Larry, can you just elaborate on the insurance for the officers, what the purpose of that is and what it's for?
Sure. So it's called Directors and Officers Insurance, and we're not a business, so we don't have employees, but we do have people that we work with. And I hate to bring this up as the example, but it could be a harassment kind of a suit, a discrimination kind of a suit. That's kind of the nature of it, Laura, if that's helpful. Those would be pretty rare in a nonprofit organization. It's more typical. It comes up more often in a for-profit business where someone gets fired and they claim they were wrongly terminated. But we could still be sued for harassment or discrimination. Yeah, that's where it's most likely going to come up. I don't know, Bill, if you have anything to add to that, but that's...
No, you've covered it pretty well. Directors and Officers Insurance, one of the things that we don't generally understand as chapter leaders is that if something goes wrong, someone walks away angry and files suit against the chapter, we individually as chapter leaders could be held liable. So what D&O insurance does is take that liability from you and puts it onto an insurance policy. That's the purpose behind D&O insurance.
Go ahead.
Is that included in our society insurance?
It is included in society insurance right now for the district. That's for the society board, society staff, and the district leaders are right now covered. They just got the district leaders covered. We separately in Evergreen have had a policy since 2010. We originally wrote it to include all chapter leaders, and everybody was under the impression that had been done. It slipped under the cracks that they took that away some years ago. So Larry and I have been engaged in the last year trying to unscrew this particular mess. And in the process of doing that, in working with BHS, we were able to get the workaround for people who were not members on our risers. And as a result of that conversation, the CFO of the society went back to the carrier and said, we need to fix this for everybody. So the carrier said, yep, we will happily do it for the districts at no charge. And we can include chapters at some charge. And it's not going to be very much, maybe $150, $300 a year to have all your people covered. That's where we are at the moment.
So it's proposed. It isn't a done deal yet. Not
a done deal, but guarantee, watch the timber. I will make sure it gets out. Okay.
Guess I better watch myself for now.
Okay. Love these questions. And I'm going to throw out one other nugget to you. And this came up in the spring preliminary contest. It had to do with the venue. So we were holding for those of you that attended Stadium High School, we rented the venue from the Pierce County School District. And when we got the initial estimate, it was astronomical. It was out of sight. And so we questioned that, we challenged that, and they said, are you guys a nonprofit? And we said, yes, we are. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, the nonprofit rate is like 1/3 of the regular venue rate. So word to the wise, if you are using a venue for your holiday show, your annual show, make sure, if you're not already, make sure you're getting the nonprofit rate. It's probably a half to a third of the for-profit rate.
That's been our experience too. Like, shout that from the rooftops, get whatever you can squeeze from a nonprofit buzzword. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know where to go from insurance. That I get excited about insurance. I want to talk about one other, let's go back to the revenue side. This is kind of a sensitive topic, and that's the idea of what's called planned giving. So I don't know if you've had Donnie Rose come to your chapter from Harmony Foundation, but this is the idea that, and I'll personalize this, in my will, in my documented will, in the event of my untimely demise, I'm going to give money to my chapter. And so that, I say that's a sensitive topic because, how do you bring that up? How do you remind members that they should keep the chapter in their thoughts when they pass away? No one wants to talk about that. And no one wants to talk about and I learned this from conversations with Donnie, no one wants to talk about a dollar amount. It feels like a money grab. And so one of the ways to broach it, and one of the ways to encourage that kind of giving, it's really a long-term giving plan, is to talk about a percentage. And so when I set mine up in my will, I didn't say I want to give X dollars to my chapter. I said, I want to give so much to my family, my children, so on and so forth. And then for what's remaining, I want to give this percentage to my chapter. So I bring that up just because it is another revenue source. Donnie Rose would be happy to come to your chapter and talk about it. I would think about doing that in this coming year, and it won't fill your coffers immediately, but over time it can be a huge help to the chapter finances. Has anyone done that? Has anyone had Donnie come out to their chapter? I see Sid raising his hand. Laura. Yeah, it's a touchy one. It's a really touchy one, but for the people that don't know about it and know how easy it is, it can be a great ad. Jim, you got a question?
Well, and more a comment going along with that, there's another provision in the law that maybe is easier to get than somebody putting their part of their will to you, and that's 401k distributions. And you can actually have one-time gifts, but the 401k distributions that an individual makes to the chapter, because we're nonprofit, are not taxed to that individual. So they don't have to pull the money out and pay taxes on it to give it. So that might be something that is easier to get to than just the gifts in the will, because it can be a one-time thing. It can be any amount they want. I mean, they could do $100, they could do $1,000 or more.
And I think I understand what you're saying. So it's the beneficiary designated for the 401k. You would make that the chapter of the society. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, that's very straightforward. That's not complicated at all. Okay, so we've got about 25 minutes left here, and I want to leave time at the end for Q&A. I thought I would just throw it back to you guys and get a couple of brave souls to speak up here. How is your chapter doing? How would you say the finances are going? Are you sitting on a big endowment from years past, or are you guys from year to year, you're kind of break even, you're barely making it? And you've got the brain trust right here. Are there things we can do, ideas we can throw out to help you? This would be a great, again, if you're brave enough to share, would love to hear how some of the chapters are doing from the treasurers. Anybody brave enough? It's okay if you're doing okay, right? You don't have to be doing great or doing poorly. Maybe you're just doing okay. That's fine too. I'd just love to hear about it.
All right, I'll jump in for Seattle.
Hey, Rob.
Talk about living on past donations. We had one of our members die, and in his will, he gave us a number of shares of Pat Carr. And we've got that still invested in the stock market, and we take money out of it when we need to for major purchases like all new uniforms or all of those kinds of things. We had another member leave us a set of money that is also in a separate account. He earmarked it for things like uniforms and the like. He didn't restrict us terribly, but he said wanted to be spent to help people that maybe couldn't afford to buy things. So that we've got that. As far as on a year-to-year basis, we're doing just fine. Our membership is up 15 this year. Our bank account has been very, very stable. We do so provide the cashiers. I guess that's a good way to say it. For a Boy Scout troop that has had Christmas tree sales forever, and for the last 4 years, we've been the cashiers for that. And for that, we received around $5,000. That combined with our grants and our dues. And for 2 years, we haven't had shows other than we did Singing Valentine's via Zoom last year, and that was profitable, surprisingly so. We're going to have a summer show, or of course have our holiday show. So that's how we stay afloat. And we usually end up in the black by a couple of $1,000s on a regular basis, not counting investment income. I'm just talking about strictly dues and shows and our Christmas tree. We end up in the black, and we give away on normal years we have shows. We give, I would say, 80 or 90% of our profit from our shows to food banks and the community things, schools, music programs, and the like.
That's great.
So,
you can afford to do that.
So we're still alive and well in Seattle.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And you reminded me of something on the fundraising. So the IRS's stance is that if, as long as you have just one major fundraiser a year, you're flying under the radar screen. So if you do the Christmas trees, we do a parking event every year, that's fine. But if you start doing 2 or 3 a year, then you're really in the business of parking cars or selling Christmas trees, and then you have a problem. So you should just have one major event a year for fundraising. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, Laura, you want to share?
Well, we're fairly new. Star Harmony is new. We're only in our 2nd year, and we're still subsisting off of our fundraiser last Christmas. So we, of course, have dues. We did get a grant through Katie for education this year, which was awesome. Yay, thank you. We're going to be doing the Christmas show with the Cordsmen this year. So that's our big fundraiser. And as far as applying for grants, we haven't been able to do that because we haven't actually been a chorus for 2 years. And a lot of them require that you have 2 years worth of stuff. So we can't do that. But I mean, we've got some money in our account. We're able to pay our directors. We're able to pay our rent. And we're looking forward to our the fundraiser at Christmas. A question I have, though, is about somebody mentioned an angel fund, and we do have an angel fund, but I'd like to know how people account for that. Do you keep it separate? Do you use only cash? Do you put it in your account? Because it's it's confidential, so I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I think ideally it's in a separate account, but I think as a practical matter, it's probably not. You just earmark it, and you know that we've set this amount of funds aside. I don't know if anyone has set up a separate account. That'd be a little administrative burden to do that. But I think most people probably just earmark it.
We just have it as a line item. Just a line item in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
We call it President's discretionary account, and earmark it as a line item in the budget.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
And we have Karen Fuel on deck.
Hey, sorry I'm not on camera. I completely forgot, so I'm not presentable, but thank you, Katie, for reminding me. So our chapter has a couple things we're still trying to figure out as far as, I don't know, treasury, bank accounts, everything. We've got 2 choruses that currently have separate checking accounts, and we don't have a chapter checking account. We have made the decision this year that that's the direction we're going in, and we will be opening up a chapter account and then have 2 separate chorus accounts as well. So it gets a little complex. Just wondering if anybody else has some experience with this and how they keep things straight and earmarked for different courses as needed. The other thing that we're doing is we've just set up a grants committee. I did apply for a couple grants last year, just kind of blindly. And so now we have a committee that's focused on that, and we're doing that on the chapter level because obviously we've got just the one EIN for the chapter. So we're applying that way. And then having to figure out, you know, if those things will be earmarked for separate choruses or if they'll be chapter functions. So yeah, anybody with any thoughts, insight, experience, I would appreciate that.
Boy, you're bringing up something that's going to come up more and more, and that is, you know, you have one EIN and you have all this activity underneath it, and you have to somehow roll it up. Boy, I had not thought that totally through. That's going to be a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, are you sharing a director, or is that some things are shared, some things are separate? Probably.
Yeah, things are separate. We've got 2 different directors. And then so we have a chapter board, and then we have 2 separate ensemble management teams as well. So going into the next year, we'll have basically a finance committee of the chapter treasurer and then the treasurers of each chorus. So we can all work through it and figure out where the money goes. But
well,
yeah,
if I put my wonky accounting hat on, I would say have separate checking accounts for the chapters. And if you're using QuickBooks or something to kind of track things.
Not QuickBooks, but we're definitely tracking everything via Excel spreadsheets.
Okay. And that's fine. Yeah, QuickBooks is, you got to pay for that, but it's not too expensive. Yeah, that's, I mean,
Dean had set up a great Excel spreadsheet that, you know, with pivot tables and all that kind of stuff. So it's fairly complex, and it does a pretty good job of tracking everything for us.
Okay.
And it's free. So
I bet there's some other courses that would be very interested, chapters in your spreadsheet, because they're going to have the same issues. Bellevue, maybe Bellevue's got their own solution.
I could talk to you. We have also have 2 choruses in the Bellevue chapter. Unlike Katie and Vocal Summit, we share a director, so that is one less problem. But what we have not yet broken out into individual chorus accounts. It's all managed, and we have it earmarked for individual choruses activities, all within the one master account. What we did do, though, was to rebrand the chapter, because everything we have is Northwest Sound, our website and everything else. We're in the process of rebranding as Acapella Northwest. That will encompass both two choruses within Acapella Northwest, but completely different approaches to music and everything. So the finances have not yet been addressed in that regard.
Yeah, our situation at the Portland, Oregon chapter was made pretty special because we had 2 different ensembles that had, the culture is very aligned, but the vision is very different as far as what the 2 ensembles are focused on accomplishing as a part of their mission statement and their vision and what they'd like to do. And then also just the way that going about fundraisers, the way going about shows, you know, there's just ways that they differentiate. And there's also people who are just want to donate funds to one ensemble and not the other. You know, there's nothing, you know, like sneaky or snarky about it. It's just like, well, my family member sings in this group, and so I want to make sure that it's benefiting this group, you know. Or we have some donors that come in and say, I'd love to just donate to the chapter, and however the chapter needs to flesh out those funds is up to the chapter. So if PDX Voices needs a little extra for something, it can go to that. Vocal Summit needs a little extra for something, it can go to that. Or if the chapter is holding an event, it can go to that. So it definitely requires communication and coordination and understanding the vibe of your chapter. if your chapter does have multiple ensembles under it, the communication has to be really clear and very often. Otherwise, there will be things that slip through the cracks, miscommunications and misunderstandings, which can lead to breakdowns of communication. I'm sure Sid's going to talk a lot about that later today, but so if you are a chapter with multiple ensembles, there are so many different ways that you can go about managing your finances. The big mic drop moment, though, is to make sure that when you are doing your tax returns and submitting those legal documents, that they are all done correctly so that you maintain your nonprofit status and aren't doing anything conflicting within, what it means to be a nonprofit. So yeah, there isn't a good, this is your 1, 2, 3 step on how you do a chapter with multiple ensembles. It requires a lot of communication and a lot of building. And maybe Larry is somebody that could come in and have that conversation with you in your chapter, just to make sure that you are getting the legal stuff of the tax things done correctly and while still honoring what you need to have done within your chapter bank accounts.
Yes,
It's not easy.
happy to do that, and would love to plagiarize other chapters, Mike, from what Karen's been able to put together for PDX.
I can say that anybody who's ever worked with me anywhere ever knows that my favorite phrase is, "I'm not here to reinvent the wheel." I'm just not. There are so many people that have come before me to do other things that have been able to perfect it. So I'm not here to wipe the slate clean and come up with my own plan. I want to learn from everybody else, and I want to adopt the best practices that fit for the group, that work for the group that I'm working with, and make sure that it's a plan that works for them, because we're not a cookie cutter organization. Every ensemble is going to have different goals and different values and different ways they want to go about things. And there's no shade in that. There's room for every different type of amalgamation of a barbershop group. So just want to make sure we're doing the legal stuff the correct way with the taxes. So yeah. But I know that PDX Oregon is an open book. If anybody has any questions on how we have chosen to go about our financial plan or 5-year plans or anything like that, we are always open to help. And that's on Vocal Summit and PDX Voices and our chapter. Because like Karen said, there are 3 different teams. We have 2 ensemble management teams and then the chapter that oversees all the big major stuff. So we're here for you down here in Portland.
Open book, but also willing to hear if we could do it better.
Because we are not perfect. So far short from perfect. We're just stumbling along, figuring it out as we go and packing plenty of Band-Aids.
Yeah, if I can put in a little plug for the President's Monthly Meeting, that's one of those things that we have talked, and I've mentioned to Bellevue chapters, also I believe in this situation, but I don't remember if they're 2 separate directors. But that's a nice method of communication for me, is to filter things up to the president level, and then we meet monthly, so it's regular communication, and that's a really great forum for us to share this kind of problem.
And may I introduce the PDX Oregon's brand new chapter president, David Dennison. That'll be made official here in the next month.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. Other questions? I think I'm going to just open it up for general questions, and we'll have time at 3 o'clock for questions as well. But other questions, any topic having to do with finance? I see. Okay, Bill's making comments in the chat there.
I have another maybe banking question, I guess. So we're banking with a credit union that seems to not understand that officers will change on a regular basis, and that maybe we need to change signatories on the account and that kind of stuff. Does anybody else run into that issue? Is anybody else working with a credit union, or have you all gone with regular banks that kind of know how businesses and nonprofits work?
I work with BECU.
Yeah.
I switched from the regular bank because they were messing things up right and left. So we went to BECU, and they've been phenomenal to work with. When we have to change signatures, I simply go in with a copy of the minutes that show that the new officers have been elected, and they give me the paperwork, and I can take it out, and the guys can sign it, and I send it in, and it's all done. They're
Nice.
phenomenal to work with.
Okay. Yeah, that was not my experience. I came in with not the same credit union, obviously, but I came in with the minutes and the Secretary of State page that showed, and they refused to put me on the bank account.
Well, let me also say that in my experience with the Portland Metro chapter, that the bank is not always, some of the banks are not easy either. They make this really a pain. I think it's good if we can shop for somebody and share that information who is easy about it.
Yes.
That might help. I had another question. My understanding is that to maintain a nonprofit status, you need to do some kind of like a charitable event. And I just was wondering if there's somebody who understands that better than me, what you need to do to qualify for that, and what are chapters doing generally to, make sure that they have their charitable purpose in mind so that they're qualifying to be a nonprofit.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of an event requirement per se, but you do have to be consistent with the Barbershop Harmony Society mission. So the way it's actually structured is we're under the umbrella of the national organization, and as long as we are supporting that mission, and it is the same mission, we're fine. When you file your tax return, and this happens at the district level as well, they look at the percentage of our program expenses that are and revenues that are dedicated to our mission. And as a general rule, it sounds like a low bar, that has to be more than a third. Ours is 80 or 90%. I mean, there's not a whole lot we do at the district level that's not related to the mission. And I'm sure it's the same at the chapter level. So as part of your 990 preparation, if you're big enough to have to prepare the full one, there's a public support test that's part of the return. And so that's where that's what they'll look at. And you should be fine. But yeah, as long as you're doing things according to our mission, both on the revenue and expense side, you should be fine.
It is worth mentioning that one of the things that U.S. Treasurer should have is your IRS letter of determination, that proves you are a 501c3 in the U.S. Now in Canada, it's different. I know you have a different designation up there, but fundamentally the process is the same. There is a revenue gathering entity that has awarded the society world a nonprofit status, and that's useful to keep in mind, because Larry keeps referring back to when you were filing your 990s, your tax returns in both countries. We need to follow very specific processes and rules, and the treasurer needs to be the person who keeps the chapter legal.
What was that form, Bill?
It's the IRS letter of determination. As a matter of fact, I've got one, and I've got the IRS letter of determination with the complete. It's a 2-page letter. Let me just do this. I will see if I can get it. Let me check out. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Right. In fact, if you are back to the venue example I brought up earlier, they will ask you to prove you're a nonprofit, and that's when you pull out this letter, which says we're part of the Barbershop Harmony Society, 501c3, blah, blah, blah. It's in this letter. So if you don't have that letter, we will get you that. Get you that letter. I think Bill's going to probably.
Is that a letter that's addressed to each individual chapter, or is that just one that applies to any chapter?
It's addressed to. There's one addressed to BHS. There's one addressed to the Evergreen District, and then it has a list of all the chapters in the district. So the full. What you would produce if you produced everything is you'd have the letter to the district, and you'd have the list of chapters, and you'd say, see, we're right here. And we're one of the chapters within the district.
I have it on my hard drive. I'm not sure how to share it with everybody here.
Yeah, question, Larry? We have the letter, but I have never seen a list of chapters associated with it. Can we have that sent to us?
Yes.
You also want to make sure that you file with your state and counties that have licensing qualifications also. Make sure it's your incorporation paperwork is filed and is current on a regular basis. And on it also asks for your 501c3.
Is that something that we would get some kind of a notification on sometime during the year?
Jim, can you answer that question? Because I know you just did ours.
I've never seen that.
You're on mute.
Okay, repeat the question, please.
Well, I was wondering, you were talking about things with municipalities and cities and that kind of thing, and licensing. I've never seen any request for that kind of thing. So,
well,
where
there's two in we file. It's called a CT-12 that gets filed with the Secretary of State of Oregon, and that's an annual thing, and that's one that Bob's talking about.
Okay, yeah, I have seen that one.
And there's another one for the city of Salem. So I'm not exactly sure what other organizations would have it. Everybody in Oregon should be filing the CT-12.
I just filled out mine for Washington. Mine was due 31st of October, and so I just did it this last week. We have to file every October basically with the Secretary of State for a nonprofit, and then I have Seattle business license, but I have to do every May because we conduct business within the city limits of Seattle. So even
and the important part is being covered. I think in some chapters it may fall on the secretary to do those filings. I don't know. I saw that Chris Powell joined the call here. Is that typically the secretary's obligation to do that?
Yes, it is, and it's something we'll cover in the next hour.
But there's the reason I do it as the treasurer, and ours, by the way, both of ours are on May 15th, is because there's a fee that has to go in with it. And so since I have to prepare the check, I just do the whole thing, send it in.
$20 for one and $72 for the other one, to be exact, with ours.
And with the few minutes left here, you just jogged my memory on something else. If you are performing, you probably owe royalties to BMI and CSAC. So you need to, if you haven't done that, or if you need a refresher on that process, you can reach out to me. And again, this kind of falls in that zone between the secretary and treasurer, but I think the secretary, the treasurer writes the check, but I think the secretary actually sends that in.
That's correct. Another thing we'll talk about in the next hour.
Okay, sorry, these are good segues. I already trying not to steal your thunder, but doing a bad job. Okay, anything else? I think we're up on time here. If you didn't get your question in, you can ask it at 3 o'clock.